All right, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Zev. I'm the head of customer success here at Attio, and really excited to present today on workflows to help you automate your deal pipelines. We're going to walk through 5 examples of workflows, some of which we use here internally at Attio, others of which come from examples of things that customers have done with Attio. Today's not necessarily a tutorial, but again, the goal is to provide some inspiration. So we're assuming you all have a basic working understanding of the 2 core concepts, which we'll go through the product, which are the deal, object, and workflows. If you are looking for a more of a tutorial on those, I definitely recommend going to our help center and reading all the great material there on how they kind of fundamentally work. So we'll go through just a couple of slides to give an overview of what we're doing today, and then we'll jump in and share some demos. So I like to think of kind of there being 2 high-level types of workflows out there you can build in Attio. Those two types of workflows are really based on the way that you trigger them. Each of these workflow types have kind of common patterns for how they're triggered, common benefits for your business that we'll talk through today. And these aren't official categories, but I thought they might be helpful as you ideate and think about how to automate your day-to-day and your team's day-to-days using Attio. So the first type of workflow, and we'll walk through a couple of examples of these in a minute, are human-triggered workflows. So those are workflows that are triggered by members of your team working inside of Attio and clicking buttons in Attio. Those types of workflows might use triggers like record actions that let users actually run a workflow manually. I'll share one example of those today. Stage changes as your teams move deals through the pipelines, record creations as new deals get created or new other objects get created. And generally, the benefits of these human triggered actions, almost like kind of co-pilot actions, are time savings, right? Something that might take 10 clicks if you're doing it all manually could take 1 when you're using a workflow. Process consistency, making sure that steps are completed every single time that, let's say, we move a deal into another stage. CRM hygiene, we'll walk through an actual hygiene just field filling out example. And managing clean handoffs between teams as you move deals through your pipeline. The other type of workflow that, again, I like to think about are machine or customer triggered workflows. They often are triggered off of similar things, right? Ultimately, records creating or being updated in Attio, but those really are triggered by upstream processes in your kind of go-to-market tooling. So signups to your product, subscription changes that your customers make within your product, inbound requests through lead forms, product usage triggers that you might set up within Attio, or scheduled triggers that you want to occur on a regular basis and check for conditions being met, like deals that haven't been touched in a certain amount of time. The true kind of automations are often really valuable just to save your team time, to completely wipe away any need to do manual maintenance work. Getting faster responses back out to your customers, because when they take an action in your product or they reach out to you, you can automatically respond to them. And routing reliability. We'll talk about a lead routing example today to make sure that when a sign up comes into your product, the same process, right, is not only automated so that it saves people time, but that it happens consistently every single time. So we'll walk through 5 actual workflows in Attio today. The first one being an inbound lead triage example. The second one, a record action to let you automatically create a deal while sitting on a person record. So the first 2 examples are going to be object creation or deal creation examples. We'll show one example for managing a handoff when a deal is closed and won, how we can create processes to bring the customer success team into a customer relationship. And then the last 2 examples are hygiene and kind of best practice examples. So stage progression requirements, so requiring that fields are filled out before a deal moves to another stage. And cold deal reminders, making sure that the teams are focusing on the highest priority work to get, to get deals closed. So again, these workflows cover everything from managing your overall deal pipeline and automating tasks to perhaps automating things that there might not be a feature for in Attio yet today, like the stage progression requirements, but setting them up within workflows. So let's get started. The first example, as I mentioned, is an inbound lead triage workflow. And I will, for each of these workflows, I'm going to walk through the blocks and then show an example of how it works. So this is very similar to a workflow that we actually have set up here at Attio. We are a PLG business. Customers can create accounts, we call them workspaces, on their own in our product. That, using our segment integration, in our case, creates a workspace object or workspace record within Attio. And this workflow fires every single time a new customer sets up their workspace for the first time. It then funnels those workflows into 3 different paths for how, from a go-to-market standpoint, we want to handle that customer. And if you haven't used one, right, the switch block gives you the ability to find conditions and then route a process to the appropriate next step based on filter criteria. So for any workspace that's created that is associated with a company that has at least 1,000 employees, we want to route that opportunity or that deal, right, or create a deal rather, to our enterprise deal management process. That involves first identifying which of our sales reps should own that opportunity, that deal. In this case, we're going to use a round robin, and we can provide the list of our, let's say, AEs that could work this opportunity to Attio. And for every new workspace that makes it down, or workflow that makes it down this branch of the workflow, Attio will cycle through each of these members, and then we're going to create a deal record. And one thing going into this deal record creation, which you'll see commonly in a lot of the workflow examples that we talked through today, is within workflows, I can take variables from prior steps of the workflow and pass them into downstream objects. So as we create this deal, I want it to be populated with important and relevant information from the workspace that was created, and in this case, the AE that we assigned to it. So the name for the deal is going to be enterprise deal, and then the name of the workspace that the user put in when that workspace is created. We're going to start this deal in the qualification stage because it's the first step. We're going to automatically assign the deal owner to be the user that was chosen from our round robin step. And of course, we're going to associate the deal with a company record in Attio. And in this case, we're going to use the variable we've used is the company that was associated with the workspace that triggered the workflow. So this deal is inheriting information from the workspace that ultimately triggered the workflow. So that's what we do with workspaces associated with companies that are at least 1,000 employees, right? And the employee data comes from the automatic enrichment that Attio does with company records. But for smaller companies, we want to run these opportunities, these deals, through other processes. The second step is actually a kind of manual triage step, where for companies that might not reach our employee count thresholds, but have raised at least $10 million, we want to give our team the ability to choose what workflow to send the opportunity through, or send this workspace through. And I'll show you what this looks like in a minute. But this is a Slack action block that I've added to this workflow, which will actually give our team buttons in Slack to choose how to route this opportunity. So we provided a message that's going to get sent into Slack. That's a startup with at least $10 million in funding, just created a workspace. We're going to provide some context in that Slack message and give our team the ability to route that workspace to either our enterprise pipeline or our self-service onboarded pipeline. And the third step of our switch are true self-service opportunities, ones that have neither 1,000 employees nor have raised $10 million. And we're going to automatically send those accounts into our onboarding sequence, email sequence, which we manage through Mixmax. So to demo this, I'll walk you through what it looks like when a workspace meets this middle block. As I mentioned, more often than not, workspaces will be created automatically, but I'll create one here manually just to show this workflow run. I'm going to give my workflow just some arbitrary ID and associate it with a company that I know has less than 1,000 employees, but has raised more than 10 million in funding, which is de facto. I'm not going to fill anything else out here just because I don't need it right now. But when I create this workspace record, we'll see just now, right? 12:16, I'm on the East Coast. That Slack message from our workflow kicked off. That is informing the team about this new opportunity, this new workspace, and giving us the choice of what to do. Do we want to run this account through our self-service sales pipeline or our enterprise pipeline? Because again, it falls in that middle zone. We don't want to totally automate this process. We want to let our team kind of make some decisions. I'm going to send this to the enterprise flow, and we'll then see, right, that enterprise deal got created. It got assigned to the next person in our round robin, which was Heather, was automatically associated with de facto. So again, the workflow that we've built here creates an automated process that makes informed decisions based off of enrichment data. It also gives our team the ability to alter, right, or layer on an additional level of human intelligence on top of that automation when the decision is not quite clear-cut. The second example that I'll walk through is another record creation example, but an example of one of the manual or human triggered workflows that I mentioned earlier. This is a really simple one, but one that I wanted to mention because this record command trigger is one that sometimes I find our customers don't always know about. So a record command gives your team the ability to manually run a workflow on a record within Attio. So this record command is triggered on a person object. And what that means from a UI perspective is on a view, I can select one or more records. Again, these are people records, and manually run a workflow. In this case, it was going to be this create deal from person workflow. The same feature also exists right on within an individual record, which again is this run workflow button. And what this particular workflow will do is let me automatically, in one click, right, create a deal record for this particular person. So maybe I just got off of a call with them and I want to move them to the next stage of our sales process. I don't have to manually create that deal record. This workflow just automatically creates that deal and populates it again, just like we saw in the last example, with the fields from the person that we're triggering it on. So this deal is going to be associated with the company that the person we triggered it on was associated with. The last thing that this record does is also updates the company and changes the company status to moving them into our sales pipeline. So if I were to run this on Anna, we'll see in my deals pipeline that new deal got created. And again, all the fields were appropriately populated. So again, an example of a manual workflow or a user triggered workflow that really is all about just minimizing the number of clicks and making sure that data is populated as it moves downstream in your sales process. The next example we're talking about, kind of moving downstream through the customer lifecycle, is a customer handoff. And this is a workflow that's triggered not off of a record being created, but a deal stage being updated. And a very common pattern for triggering, this is a very common pattern for triggering workflows as a deal moves through a pipeline. And anytime you want to trigger a workflow off of a pipeline stage, you'll need two steps. You'll need the record updated trigger triggering off of our deal stage attribute. And then we'll need a filter so that we only continue this workflow when deals are moved into the stage that I care about. In this case, it's closed won. So this workflow will only continue, and this workflow is only triggered between these two steps when a deal is moved to closed won. The first thing we want to do is celebrate. We'll put some confetti on the screen to congratulate the team on closing a deal. We will, similarly to the workflow that I showed earlier, change the customer type to customer. So now that we've closed a deal with them, we're going to move them from a prospect to a customer. And the core of this workflow is to move this customer into a new stage of our customer lifecycle. And in this case, our customer success team manages their processes in a list. So this workflow will add a new company to our customer success list, passing in, like we always do, the information about the deal and the company that this workflow was triggered off of. We're going to set default stages. We'll pass in the deal value into a list attribute. And once we've created this list record, the next list entry, the last two steps of this workflow are to create a task for the AE to remind them to schedule a transition meeting. So we'll use the adjust time block just to calculate when this task will be due. We'll take the date that this record was updated, so the date that this trigger was triggered. We'll add 7 days, and then we'll create a task that's assigned to the deal owner, right? So the AE that owned the deal, to schedule a call with the customer success team to make sure that handoff actually gets done. Now, I'm not going to show you an example of this because I want to talk about I want to add one more step to this workflow. And this is this fourth example of adding required fields to a stage change. So the workflow that we just talked about is a workflow that's triggered when a deal moves into closed won. A question we get asked a lot is a hygiene question. I want to make sure that when we move a deal into our closed won stage, that the rep has populated all of the required fields for, let's say, our account receivable team or our finance team to go execute on that opportunity. So I might want to require that the deal value attribute be populated. And we can build a workflow to ensure that that happens every time. And what I've done to achieve that is taken this closed deal workflow that we built earlier and just added one more step or one more fork using an if-else. So after we've filtered the workflow to only continue for closed won deals, we've added another if-else that only continues on to the celebration and the creation and moving the deal to moving the company record to be tagged as a customer if two conditions are met. And that is if the deal record has a value, right, a $2 value that's not empty. So if the value is set for that attribute, and if the deal is associated with the company, we want to make sure that every deal is associated with the company record. And if these criteria are not met, what we're going to do is actually bump the deal record back. We're going to move it from closed won, which the person moved it into, back to its previous value. And we're going to warn the user that we did that. So we're going to tell the user, right, that the deal was not, even though you moved the deal to closed won, Attio did not update the deal because you were missing fields. And we're going to let the user know that in order to move a deal to closed won, both the deal value attribute and the related company must be populated. So what that looks like here is if I have a deal where the deal value is not set, I move it into closed one. It's going to let me know that I'm not allowed to do that, and it's going to move the deal back. And of course, once I populate the value, let's say we closed a $100,000 deal with Apple. I move it over now. Attio is going to celebrate, and when I go in to look at the information, the company record page for Apple, we'll see that Apple is now a customer, and the task for scheduling that intro call got created and assigned to Cassandra, who owned the account. The very last workflow that we'll talk through, I don't have an example for, but I don't have a demo of, but I'll walk you through the workflow itself, which is a workflow that handles deals that are stale, deals where we haven't had any communication with the customer in a certain amount of time. And this is a workflow that's not triggered off of any action within Attio or any data element that was updated in Attio. It's quite the opposite. We're looking for inaction. And the way that you can do that is using a recurring schedule. So a recurring schedule in Attio fires on a regular basis. In this case, this workflow is triggered every Monday at 9 a.m. my time in New York. And the first thing I want this workflow to do is find all active deals where we have had no interactions with that account in the last 14 days. So this find block searches through all of our deals and uses an advanced filter to find deals that are in either the meeting, proposal, or negotiation stages. So deals that are active, where our last interaction, this is using Attio's communication intelligence attributes that pick up on your email inbox and your calendar invites, was before, right, or was at least 14 days ago. So we've had no communication via email or calendar invites in the last 14 days. Attio will find as many of those exist. We're going to quickly do a due date calculation here too, because one of the things we're going to do is create a task. So again, just calculate the date that's in 4 days. And most times that you have a find block, right, where Attio can find multiple records, you're going to use another tool that we haven't talked about yet in workflow, which is a loop. And a loop lets you iterate over multiple objects or multiple records and take a series of actions against multiple records within Attio. So this loop is going to loop through all of those cold deals that we found and do one of two things. We're going to look to see whether not only has the interaction been 2 weeks ago, but whether it was in fact 3 weeks ago that we haven't talked to this customer. If they are 2 weeks, but not yet 3 weeks stale, we're going to create a task to have the owner of the deal. We're going to assign the task to the owner and let them know that they really need to get back in touch with that account. We're also going to let them know that in one more week, if there hasn't been any action or any interaction, we're going to automatically move this deal to closed loss. And that's what the other branch of this workflow does. So next week, next Monday, when this workflow runs again, if a deal record has now made it to 21 days with no interactions with that company, it'll make it down our other fork where we're going to automatically move that deal to closed loss. And we know that closing a deal is a pretty strong incentive to kind of drive our teams to make sure they get back in touch with that customer. So that's the last step of this block. I don't have a live example to walk you through with this one, but I hope these 5 examples of workflows to help you automate your deal pipeline were helpful. Thank you all again.